Hey, how's it going? My name is Sid Greenwood, and for my research project, I did dithering, which is essentially turning opaque textures transparent. All right, so before we go back and explain everything you just saw, first, the credits and source for everything I learned here or improved on is from Daniel Lett on YouTube. And real quickly, so the basic nodes that you're going to see are going to be alpha color splitting and dithering. This is kind of the bread and butter of everything that we're doing here. Essentially, base color alpha splitting is taking the alpha value off of something. For example, this is going to be the texture 2D that we're going to put into the color map, and then doing something with said value. What are we doing with that value? Well, in the normal version of dithering, where we're just turning things transparent, we are taking that alpha value and we are comparing it with this right down here. So this is a dithering pattern, and essentially using the screen position of the object and a dithering size that you can set in the inspector, a different size of this is spread across the whole color map that you're rendering. And if the alpha value of a pixel on the image reaches this threshold, it gets called out. So how do we extend that? Well, first of all, you're going to see some scrolling on the textures like we saw on that little troop there. That is done through the tiling and offset node along with a lerp, a comparison node comparing when that alpha value has been moved past the threshold, and then just a simple vector 2D direction and then a magnitude for how fast it scrolls. And then here are those comparisons, conditionals, and lerps. Essentially, we're taking the alpha value, and there's a threshold, right? So in the simple version of it, when the threshold is hit, we're just calling out that part of the object, rendering it out, essentially. With the replacement that you saw, instead of turning it transparent, we're taking that part that should be transparent, and we're now replacing that individual pixel with the scrolling texture until it has been fully replaced. Some things I learned about, obviously all those nodes. The split and dither were big, along with the screen position, just kind of learning exactly how positions work, whether it's screen, object, local, world, all that. And then the comparison and the lerp. Those two honestly were my favorite. That's what made the changing of everything possible, and I think that's where a lot of dynamic functionality lies. I would say some issues I ran into and discovered were that with the dithering, it is based on resolution. So it's always best at native, and unfortunately on this monitor it's not the best, so it can look very pixely. And of course, if it's just a color and you're dealing with that low resolution, it's it's not going to look like a transparent object. It's going to look like an object with a bunch of dots in it. All right, now let's check out some of the things it can do in Editor. So real quick, here is the base graph. The things I talked about in the slides are here. So here is that alpha splitting, just with the sample texture. And then here is the dithering. And then the experimental graph is here, where you're going to still see the base color map functionality with the splitting and the dithering. But now we have a little bit of conditional action going on here. And then this is where we are making that scroll texture happen. So these are two objects that have opaque materials on them, and this is what they look like, pretty standard and basic. And then here are two objects with transparent materials on them. Now, as you can see right here even, just as kind of changing the way I'm looking at it a little bit, you get these kind of nasty looking effects and changes. Doesn't look that pleasant. Over here, here are two objects that have the dithering material on them. So what happens when we dither them out? Well, they slowly get rendered out. And then you can mix and match them to get pretty cool looking effects where now they are opaque technically, but they are transparent. You can see through them. You can see through both of them. Still, sometimes color changes happen. Like right here, you can see the blue through the red and not the red through the blue. But that's not too big of a deal. And then here is a little skin right here. And same deal, similar to how when something gets in the way of a camera in a game, something like this would happen where they kind of fade out a little bit faster. That's what you can do with something with basic dithering. Now, I thought about that. I was just going to show that, and I was like, yeah, it's all right, but it's kind of just extra steps to make something see-through. So what else can we do? Well, Maybe we can add multiple textures and dither those out. Maybe we can do multiple textures and colors, make them matte over time. And of course that looks really pixely, but you can crank that dithering down, get something a little more uniform. And alright, this is still pretty cool, but now I have two colors and two textures just to change the color of one texture. Seems kind of counterintuitive. What else can we do? Well, how about changing the texture and moving it a little bit? I don't really know exact implementation of this, but it kind of has like a little Harry Potter effect. You could probably transform like a wood wall to stone or something like that. Or I imagine this would look really good for like blinds shutting and closing. That'd be really easily. And then of course, here's the last thing here where we are adding a color change, a texture map change, and movement to it all. Of course, we go ahead and look at this little buddy right here and launch a projectile at him. He gets real mad. And we can keep doing it. But yeah, that's it. And so for the experimental plans, I hope to figure out the positional issues. So instead of doing screen position, figuring out how to make it look more consistent at all distances, I'd like to do some visual modifications where I can add some further noise or movement patterns to better suit dithered visual effects. Excuse me. And then I would like to make some variants. I'd like to see, can I maybe use something other than dithering or different patterns to get a less uniform looking effect? Maybe more of like a wave over something rather than the whole thing changing.